bridge collapsed. The mountain road washed out. All the signs are obscured by fog. Your only directions are detours. Eventually it dawns on you. Sometimes you need to get lost to discover where you're supposed to be. Welcome to Merlin's Barn.
Welcome to yet another episode of Merlin's Barn, broadcasting, as always, from Fort Blanket, south of the Yukon. And tonight we have, of course, myself, because you're hearing me, Merlin. And with us we also have...
Tasia.
Nicole.
And Matt.
We've got four of us. Now, we have to start out with a disappointment this evening. We have not purchased Chinese recently. So we do not have misfortune cookies. So you all have an assignment, which is go out, order yourself some Chinese, pick it up, take it home with a bunch of fortune cookies, and send us the most ridiculous fortunes that you've received. You can send those to merlinsbarn@gmail.com, or you can always comment up on the Instagram or something like that.
Yes, send us your misfortune.
I think I actually got a nice one on Christmas Eve.
Really?
Yeah, I got an actual, very nice fortune for my Christmas Eve dinner, and it was something like, you will just be prosperous and happy with your love. And I'm like, cool, thank you.
Wow, real fortune.
A real fortune.
An actual fortune.
Unfortunately, that worker has since been sent off to a camp and killed.
Yeah.
They are sent from
You
China.
know?
All right, so this evening I'm going to let Matt give us an introduction. We have a whole pile of unexpected craziness that I'll just start off with saying, beaver slushies?
Yes,
Yeah.
beaver slushies. Okay, so we don't normally deal with war history. There's podcasts that cover it already. There's YouTube channels that cover it. Plus, although all kinds of innovation and crazy and bizarre stuff occurs in the circumstances of war, it's also usually a horrific topic and sad, and we don't want to do that. But this topic takes place entirely away from combat. It's set in World War II, and we're talking like ice cubes in bathtubs, 2 close calls of ricocheting bullets, and a team of conscientious objectors building a big ice barge in a lake in Canada. And none of us was anywhere near any combat. No one was actually hurt doing this. Well, one guy was.
Oh, the one with the ricochet?
Yeah, but
Okay.
we'll get to him later.
What happened?
Mild trauma.
So, to back up a few years before World War II, long-distance transoceanic air travel, no problem. You kind of would run out of gas halfway across the Atlantic. So, yep, yeah. So they would have to do this hopping process of going from New York to Labrador to Iceland, then to Ireland, and then finally to England or the continent. The Navy even had dirigibles, airships that had biplanes on them that they could launch and then land, quote unquote, with a trapeze contraption. These small biplanes for patrolling the North Atlantic.
Wait, it's like the Zeppelin in Indiana Jones.
Yes, exactly that.
I didn't know you could fly. Fly, yes. Land, no.
Side note, they couldn't land those either because they did not have wheels on those airplanes. They had to be hooked back up onto the dirigible again.
That's mildly upsetting. Just mildly.
Wait, so then are they gliders then technically?
No, they have engines. They just
Okay.
they have engines. They just don't have a way to actually land.
No
on
landing
anything.
gear. The landing gear was just a hook on top.
Gliders don't have anything, so
True. So there were some schemes at the time to try and make floating islands out of icebergs with runways capable of handling large bombers. I found a little bit of history. Not much was said on Dr. Gert von Waldenberg's work in 1930 on Lake Zurich to try and make an artificial iceberg.
Is his name the first red flag?
Oh no!
I'm just sitting there thinking, what brought up the idea for artificial iceberg? Hey, we sank the Titanic with one.
Yeah. Someone else had ended up just using a real iceberg. Hey, they're already out there. They had some problems with that. They're not long enough for a runway and had that pesky issue of rolling over randomly.
Not to mention the traction would be terrible.
Yeah, I'm not sure what their plan was for that, to be honest. But by 1942, wartime Britain was looking really hard at options to safeguard Atlantic shipping. So they revisited making an iceberg. So, not wanting to let nature stop them, they enlisted the help of the Canadians.
Because, hey, it's cold up there.
Yeah, presumably they're well versed in all things to do with ice.
Because it's cold.
It's Canada.
And hey, igloos too.
So, hidden away on Patricia Lake in the Rocky Mountains near Alberta, there was a team of conscientious objectors who built a 1,000-ton ice boat. Yep, they built a boat out of ice. It did have a wood skeleton or frame, insulation, and then an air conditioning plant to keep the ice cold. And sometime in 1942, they're doing this experiments with the ice. Something they figured out, I don't know how they didn't pick up on this a lot sooner, they figured out that ice was fragile and broke really easily.
What?
I'm completely amazed by this discovery.
News to me.
Yeah, I don't know how they made it all the way to 1942, and we're like, wait a minute, it breaks really easy if you hit it.
Flabbergasted I am.
One thing real quick. I can't remember the other thing I saw, but they have conscientious objectors doing the weirdest jobs. Has anyone thought about that?
Well,
Yeah,
some of
that's
that's
a
just
whole topic.
because some of that's because they wanted to participate,
right.
but not in the combat role. So
So we're
basically,
gonna have you do this weird experimental thing.
Yes, go to what would later become a resort area in Alberta and build a boat out of ice.
ice boat.
So in comes Pykrete. And Pykrete is not invented by Mr. Geoffrey Pyke. It was just named for him because this whole floating ice runway thing was his crazy scheme.
Now we're going to divert over into Geoffrey Pyke for a few minutes for a few minutes here, because Matt came up with Pykrete, with the idea of covering Pykrete, and I was like, oh, this was a Mythbusters episode, which gave us an excuse to sit and watch Mythbusters again. Which, if you have never watched Mythbusters, shame on you. Go find it on Discovery and start watching
I
it.
didn't know you needed an excuse to watch this.
I didn't know there were people who hadn't seen it at this point, and that upsets me.
There are lots of people who haven't seen it.
And
it's
actually,
good reason to be upset.
many of the episodes are available like on YouTube now.
Oh, that's awesome. So Mythbusters, who we will loop back to. But I started looking up notes to read up on the Pykrete, and just started wondering about our fellow who came up with this scheme.
Who is Geoffrey Nathaniel Pyke?
Yes. So Geoffrey Nathaniel Pyke, which you can actually get I need to order this book. There's a book out there called Churchill's Iceman, about the life and times and career of Geoffrey Nathaniel Pyke, who lived from 1894 to 1948. And I love this quote that I found. Not a scientist, but a man of vivid and uncontrollable imagination, as quoted by Lord Zuckerman.
Sounds like that sounds like a report that was going to be given to a parent about their student. Probably an elementary school student.
Mm-hmm.
This actually sounds like a combination of reports that were given to my parents, and I'm nowhere near this level of genius, but I remember I had to take physics pass-fail because my math was creative. But I could build and do all the experiments successfully. And I had a Latin teacher who once declared that my translations were the most wonderful use of poetic license.
Not how you want to hear your translation described.
Yeah. So the many projects of Mr. Pyke, we're just going to hit on a couple of them here, because he just would come up with idea after idea after idea and roll with them. In World War One, he decided to get himself involved, and he informed the Daily Chronicle in England that he was going to insert himself into Germany and start sending dispatches back, something that the Secret Intelligence Service had been unable to do up to that point. So, what he does, he manages to work his way into Berlin.
I think he used a fake passport.
Yeah, he did use a fake passport, where he was shortly after captured, and the Germans considered executing him as a spy. But they instead placed Mr. Pyke in an internment camp, where he looked at this as a problem that needed to be solved, and escaped and made his way back to England, where the British were rather surprised that he had made it back, began to wonder if he was a returning spy, but the Daily Chronicle celebrated him as a hero.
Did he have any formal training in spy tradecraft?
As far as I can tell, there was no formal training in much of anything, honestly. He just would put his mind to something and get rolling with it. I mean, he gets back from World War I and then gets interested in the stock market and makes a fortune on the stock market. So he figured it, once again, he figured out something there, and then he uses that fortune to establish a school.
So he basically establishes the school called the Malting House out of his own home. He has taken the ideas of John Dewey and Maria Montessori and combined them into something absolutely beautiful from what I was reading. He went with the follow the child ideal because his own education growing up was basically, how was it put? It was like British boarding school type deal for military uppers children. And his mother continued that he must maintain the Orthodox Jewish lifestyle while at the school. So this made him the victim of a lot of bullying, a lot of mistreatment, and just the style of teaching at that time was, I give you information, you will not regurgitate information, you will not understand the information, but you can regurgitate it, and that's all we want. He was more so of the ideal that he wanted his son to be able to understand things. And so he goes and joins with, I believe it was Susan Isaac, and they create this school that lasts for about 7 years?
It closes in 1927.
1927, yeah. Unfortunately, Pyke had gone bankrupt, which kind of ended the schooling. But it was very interesting reading that it made sense on the inside, which as someone who works in a Montessori school, that's basically what it is. It makes sense when you're in the thick of it, but to an outside person, it might look like chaos because you're letting the child do what they would like. You're letting the child choose how they are educated, basically. That does not mean there's no boundaries, no limits. No, everything is within limits. But it is done in such a way that the child can show you what they are interested in and that you can follow and figure out what way of learning, which way of teaching is going to benefit this specific child the best.
No, was this like one of the first Montessori type schools then?
No, so at this point, Maria had been doing her thing for a while.
Okay.
We're in the 20s, so...
Because I don't know the history of the Montessori schools at all, so...
That's a whole rabbit hole that I could go down, and I'm not going to, I promise.
Yeah, that could be a whole other
Sorry,
podcast episode.
Only one question, only one answer, please.
No, there were a handful, and they were steadily becoming more popular. They are going to drop off in the 40s, though, because of Mussolini.
Okay.
And part of that is also because she's going to be, Maria herself and her son will be stuck over in India, technically as enemies of the state, because they're Italian, and so enemies of Britain.
Oh, wow, okay.
So it drops off for a bit during the 40s and 50s, at least for us Westerners. But
Okay.
over in Southeast Asia, there is a boom.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're going to pick up with after the bankruptcy. He decides, it's 1930. The Spanish are having a civil war. How can I help? Literally, he goes and creates this organization called the Voluntary Industrial Aid for Spain. And he goes and he finds whoever he can, does not matter, formal training or none. Anyone who has the ability to help, he wants to round them up to help Spanish. One of the biggest things that they were doing was sending vehicles specifically for medical usage. So think ambulatory motorcycles and sidecars, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. Isn't that insane?
I'm trying to think of that's. I can't think of one.
You're going up into the guerrilla.
Anything being done before that? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the guerrilla warfare in the Spanish mountains, basically, that this is going to be aiding. To get up those like tiny, windy paths, either a horse or a motorcycle.
Yeah, which when we get to World War II, we replaced with the Jeep, but the Harleys and the sidecars were the Jeep beforehand.
So we're coming out of the Spanish Civil War, where we're
coming out of the Spanish Civil War. He's got a brief period of quiet, and then he, I think there's a point where he's trying to raise, where he is trying to raise awareness of the Jewish situation in Germany. And then what he decides, then what he does is he creates what I like to call the Golf Spies. Mr. Pyke, once again, who was Jewish, became interested in finding out what Germans truly thought of the Nazi government, which is a little bit scary because, I mean, the camps were originally created to re-educate the people who disagreed with the Nazi government. So he had the idea to take a poll, and he recruited a group of students. I think it was about 10 of them. And Pyke's plan was for the students to use golf as their cover and ask their opinion poll questions through general conversation. It was even suggested by a German that the golfers engage in matches with clubs in Germany. Well, this plan did get off to a start. The Golf Spies were brought home due to the start of World War II. Pyke desired to pull together this poll and send the results of it to Hitler, but that did not come to fruition.
I don't want to know what would have happened to that man if that had come to fruition.
Well, he was happily in England. It was his Golf Spies that he put at risk there.
Still.
So we have all of these projects leading up to.
So yeah. So when I hear about a man, because I did not know about this history until tonight of Geoffrey Pyke. So when I hear about a man who, in World War I, inserted himself on his own volition into wartime Berlin to be a spy, was captured, then escaped, then later on went to set up a Montessori school in his living room.
So it was not technically fully Montessori because it's a joining of several different pedagogies.
We brought in John Dewey too, didn't we?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
I only know the cat.
That's a great book.
Were very overlapping, so they all melded together beautifully.
But
Sorry.
I oversimplified it by saying a Montessori school, but to
gosh darn,
to have a advanced private school in his living room.
And I should say that it was for like 2-year-olds to like 7-year-olds, and they're doing like high key stuff like geography, woodworking, like
wow, yeah,
at like 5 to 7.
So
somebody likes to live dangerously.
So when I hear this, the idea of making a giant floating ice runway just doesn't seem all that absurd anymore.
No, there's more ideas he came up with, inventions he came up with leading into World War II even. That, like, one of them led to the U.S. tracked weasel. There was a tunnel system for unloading ships in areas that didn't have docks.
Did he have ADHD?
I would think that is a sincere possibility.
Yeah.
ADHD, autism, he is on the spectrum somewhere.
So
he just sounds like he has a spectrum.
Luckily for me, more of the story of Pykrete is pretty crazy also. Not just Geoffrey Pyke, but this material. So the man behind Pykrete was actually Professor Hermann Francis Mark. Formerly, he was a physical chemistry teacher in Vienna, and then World War II, so he fled to the U.S. And then while he was at the Polytechnic Institute of Brooklyn, he began mixing wood pulp with water to make basically the icy equivalent of what we would call now fiber reinforced concrete.
Beaver slushies.
Yes, I think I really think we're onto something right there.
We've got a market right here.
We
right up the road.
We could have a sequel to Hundreds of Beavers. Which, by the way, if you have not seen it, it is a cultural and life experience. You need to watch it.
Nicole's rolling her eyes. So he mixes the wood pulp with water, makes this fiber reinforced concrete, and now the story turns on. Yep. So right now we have the Canadians at a hidden lake in the Rockies playing at the world's largest ice cube tray. Some guy in New York is making his sawdust slushies for the beavers. So let's make it weird. Now, to be fair, we need to do thorough, comprehensive testing on this material. We have to understand its plasticity and its, how it deforms versus how it breaks, how it can be used in place of steel. All the same kind of testing and material study you would do with wood or steel to try and build a ship. So let's do it in the world famous Smithfield Meat Market in London.
Oh, that sounds like a great idea.
What?
Yep. It was several stories down in the hidden part of it, and they wore electric heated flight suits because they were working inside a freezer in a meat market. Yes?
Hidden meat market? Scared.
So the Smithfield Meat Market is a famous livestock and meat market in London.
Right.
And it was a labyrinth of sections that were underground with refrigerated sections and coolers and all.
Okay.
There was actually a really devastating fire in it at one point because it's just this labyrinth of different stores and refrigerators and all.
Putting the refrigeration aspect in there makes much more sense. Thank you.
Yeah. And so, hidden behind hanging slabs of meat within sight of St. Paul's Cathedral is where they tested Pykrete. They figured out that you could shoot at it. We'll get to that part in a moment. So, now introduce the salesman of the year, as I call them. Lord Mountbatten was the chief of combined operations, and he was on the chief of staff committee in England, which is something similar to, say, the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the U.S.
Okay.
And Geoffrey Pyke had his ear about this miracle product, this Pykrete, so Lord Mountbatten, in his own words, in a speech several years after the war, claims that he dropped a block of Pykrete into Prime Minister Churchill's bath with the Prime Minister in it.
Oh, geez.
So Churchill sees this block of ice not melting rapidly because when you mix the wood pulp with the water and freeze it, it melts much, much more slowly than regular ice.
I could just see Churchill sitting there with his cigar in the tub looking quite annoyed.
I don't like the amount of Churchill bathtub stories I know now. One was enough. Two is weird, and now I know there's more.
I think they started the Churchill movie with him sitting in the bathtub, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
No, but the weird things that happens to him in the bathtub.
So, Lord Mountbatten's not done being salesman of the year here. He gets better. So this convinced Churchill to have him take a sample of it to the Quebec conference, which was a conference with high-ranking admirals and generals from Canada, U.S., and England. So in a room full of the top men, so to speak, of the war, he draws his service pistol and shot at the stuff. First at a block of ice that, as expected, shattered, but then at a block of the Pykrete, where the bullet ricocheted off and grazed the trouser leg of Admiral Ernest King.
That's also that's. And I can say I was from some of my reading today. I found an article online about a guy who tested shooting the ice and shooting the Pykrete with successful results in the ice shattering and the Pykrete it ricocheting, and then the Mythbusters did the same on their episode too.
Sizable crater was made, but once again the bullet still ricocheted. It bounced back off.
And then, so I guess, now Lord Mountbatten has now shot at the stuff in a room full of admirals and generals, nearly injured somebody. And I guess not to be outdone by a superior, a similar demonstration was done at the Combined Operation Headquarters, where the Chief of Imperial General Staff, Sir Alan Brooke, was struck in the shoulder by a rebounding bullet.
Oh my God.
Oh no.
Yeah, Lieutenant Commander Douglas Edshead Grant, I guess he couldn't be outdone by Lord Mountbatten. He had to actually hit somebody with a ricochet.
This will prove my point.
So I'm a little disturbed by the fact that we didn't test this. Not test. It's been tested. We didn't demonstrate it not once nearly injured someone. No, we had to demonstrate it a second time and actually hit somebody.
So maybe what we wanted to do with the Pykrete, rather than making a ship, making armor out of it.
Well, that's kind of what they were going for somewhat with the ship.
Okay.
Which is where things really then took a scope creep or mission creep took over badly here. So Project Habbakuk was a proposed ship to be built from this stuff. And the ship was going to be incredibly huge. It's not a ship. It was a iceberg. I mean, brain-hurtingly massive.
Is this the proposed carrier, or did they want to do something larger than the carrier to be like, wow, look at this stuff?
It was a carrier,
Okay.
but just where your armor point comes in, the Admiralty wanted to be torpedo-proof. So the hull was going to be 40 feet thick. That's like what, the width of the barn?
Yeah, that's almost the full width of the barn.
What is the normal thickness of a ship? Does anyone here know? I feel like you people would know.
Anywhere from inches to, I think, an armor belt on a battleship is like a foot or 24 inches or something.
That's what I was expecting.
Merlin, do you remember? We were all just at the museum in Chicago looking at the U-boat, and it even told us how thick the hull was, and I don't remember.
What? I really don't remember. Don't
Good,
touch the
very
U-boat.
It was very good.
No, it's definitely not 40 feet thick, though. I mean, that's extremely beyond abnormal.
To your question about it being an aircraft carrier, yes. But the Fleet Air Arm wanted to be able to fly heavy bombers from it. So it was an aircraft carrier. They're going to have the deck was going to be 2,000 feet long. Over a quarter mile. Almost half a mile.
This is just, and at this point, you're really just going off into the realm of completely bonkers nuts.
This is just too big to work at this point.
How many trees would you have to shred for that?
Oh, we're getting to that.
Oh no.
The numbers are staggering. We're going to get to those numbers. So
Deforestation, here we go.
he was going to have 26 1,100 horsepower electric motors and external nacelles were going to drive the vessel at a massive speed of 7 knots. Just enough to keep it from drifting in the wind. Originally, it was going to use basically differential power on these motors to steer it. Put more power to one side, less on the other side. But the Royal Navy said it needed a rudder, which was going to be over 100 feet tall. The project was canceled before they even figured out how they were going to mount a rudder on it.
That's fair.
He was going to have 16 refrigeration plants to keep the thing cold. Turbo-electric generators totaling 32,000 horsepower would have been needed. They found a place to build it in Corner Brook, Newfoundland. Had they built it, it was going to take a 100-acre plant. And your question about the number of trees, 300,000 tons of wood pulp.
Wow.
25,000 tons of insulation. It would have been 35,000 tons of timber for the frame, not the wood that was shredded up into a slushy mix. And this is when things really started going around the bend, I think, and someone had stopped and looked at the numbers like, wait a minute, 10,000 tons of steel. An escort carrier only required like 8,000 tons of steel.
At this point, it's not even providing an advantage for over just building ships.
Yeah.
And if you build a ship, a regular ship doesn't melt.
So they were just going to build a U-boat target?
Well, it was torpedo proof. The hull was 40 foot thick. It could take multiple rounds of torpedoes hitting the same spot.
Are you sure?
It's
well, no, because no one's built it to test it.
It would have taken the heat off the other vessel.
Yeah.
Just float it out there with a big target on it. Say, U-boats hit here.
Yeah, pretty much.
They did build the small version. What scale was it? Because they built the small version up on the lake in the Rockies.
Right, and that one was 1,000 tons.
Yeah.
Which is no joke. I mean.
And that one had the full refrigeration system in it and everything. And I don't know, it's just, I've seen things where it was like, we're going to use them in the Pacific. And I'm sitting there going, even with a refrigeration system, you're going to start sloughing off that 40-foot thick. I think some of this design crew were involved in going on to build my favorite vehicle, the Austin Champ, which I've done prior rants on.
Oh, that very well could be. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense when you say it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of refrigeration required was massive. I mean, when they figured out it was going to be 10,000 tons of steel in the refrigeration system, and it's like, we can build an aircraft carrier with that same amount of metal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the whole thing would have displaced 2.2 million tons of water, which numbers. What are numbers? Like at some point, they just become incomprehensible.
Yeah,
So-
we've reached that.
Beyond.
So
Beyond.
to give some perspective, to date, the largest ship the world has ever known that has actually been built and launched was the Seawise Giant. That was a 1970 supertanker. It displaced 646,000 tons. So it was a quarter the size of this proposed thing.
Oh.
And was enormous at 1,500 feet long and still shorter than this would have been had they built it.
Yeah.
Had the Pykrete carrier been made, would it have caused the sea levels to like fully rise when placed upon the water?
I can't.
Is that possible?
I can't imagine because I mean, just it's basically another giant iceberg floating around.
Okay, I guess, but like also that's the only way I can comprehend this.
Yeah, probably not. I can't imagine it making that much of a difference.
Maybe if you put it in a bay or something.
Something contained a lake, it would definitely, but you couldn't find a lake that size.
Yeah, although I do imagine that, like, I'm going to imagine that, like, in the port when they launched it, it was gonna have some significant impact until it got into the oceans.
It's just absolutely insane.
So by the end of 1943, several factors entered the project. One being the fact that they figured out that the refrigeration plant alone would use as much steel as just building an aircraft carrier to begin with. They weren't done the whole idea of a floating island concept for launching heavy bombers, though. There was plans were made for welding together multiple Liberty ship hulls. That never came to fruition. Mostly what killed any of these whole iceberg and floating island things was
impracticality.
Well, really it was actually two things. It was access to the Portuguese airfields in the Azores and basically bigger gas tanks, longer range aircraft.
And common sense.
Yeah, I'm going to add in the common sense there too. I'm open to Nicole on that one. Yeah, that's I mean, and they cut they ended the experiment up in the Rockies and then sort of semi-dismantled that and just let it sink. There are divers still going up to. Did you catch what lake that was on? I don't remember what the lake was.
It was Lake Patricia, I think.
Okay, Lake Patricia. There are actually people who go up there and dive on the wreck.
Yep, Patricia Lake, and I think there's a memorial plaque posted on the shore.
It's apparently it's not easy to access. You either have to hike in or it's a 45-minute fin swim. It's not the easiest thing to access.
Oh yeah, because it was it's what in like a national park kind of area or something now, so it's no motor vehicles.
Yeah, no motor vehicles. And then what was neat though is we prepped for this, watching the Mythbusters episode where they took the Pykrete to another level. And instead of it just being sawdust mixed in with water, they actually did layers of newspaper. And how thick was the hull on their boat, did they say?
Let me see.
While they're looking, I'm going to guess it was maybe like an inch.
Yeah, it's not too thick. They went up and built it in Alaska.
For their super Pykrete boat, which was constructed via basically placing frozen newspapers like shingles and melding them all together, and having that all kind of like sandwiched between two Carolina skiff type forms. It took 2,000 pounds of newspaper, and they were making sure to soak it through and press it all down, eliminating any air bubbles. A Yamaha 150 motor.
150 horsepower.
Okay, 150 horsepower, thank you. Motor was added, and that was another 500 pounds to that initial 2,000.
And they got up to 23 miles per hour with that?
Yep, 23 miles per hour. At that point, they sprung a leak, and they were on the water for 30 minutes.
Yes, they got about 30 minutes in cold water. And this boat had no refrigeration systems or anything.
It had one refrigeration system, because Adam used it to fix the leak.
It wasn't a refrigeration system.
What was it? It was a fire extinguisher, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you want to explain how that works?
So the rapid discharge from a fire extinguisher is going to be frosty cold. So basically, yeah, it was a one-time use refrigeration system.
Okay. I'll give you
It didn't
that.
recirculate back again, and so it chilled down and sealed the leak for a moment. So you can imagine, had they built this project of Habbakuk ship, it would have had that kind of refrigeration running continuously, which would probably keep it alive in Alaska or the North Atlantic. I'm still with Merlin. I don't see how it's going to survive going to Japan.
Yeah, I don't see it in the
No.
Pacific. I mean, just watching the Mythbusters boat, just with it starting to, the paper's starting to slough off of it. And just to further show, like, they did a great demonstration of the strength difference between ice and what they came up with, the super version of Pykrete, was they set up sort of this diving board clamped onto a workbench. And on just a pure ice diving board, they stacked 40 pounds of lead weights, and when Adam goes to put the last 5-pound weight on, it just barely touches and it snaps off. On the Super Pykrete, they ended up running out of weights, and then they end up with Adam himself just up there standing on it, and
He just starts jumping up and down on it, doesn't he?
Yeah, and so that just shows your difference in strength between ice. And they even did a test comparing ice versus regular Pykrete and their Super Pykrete. Once again, it's an awesome awesome episode to watch. It's fun watching them shoot around on a ice boat.
I would like to give my notes for the melt time, and they did test the melting time in warm water. I think that was
Yes,
a
yeah, it
very
was warmer
important
water.
thing because they did play off the Pacific for that part. The times for the ice, Pykrete, and Super Pykrete are as follows: ice, yikes. Pykrete, 5 minutes, 5 times longer than the ice. The Super Pykrete lasted for about an hour, putting it at 12 times the stability of the Pykrete in warm water.
So, and once again, still, we're not recommending that you go out and build an ice boat, because
But if you'd like to, it takes 14% wood pulp and 86% water by weight, just so you know.
Thank you
Recipes.
for that. Yeah,
You're
because
welcome.
some of the research I was doing, we're not clear if it was by weight or by volume, but I guess the Mythbusters had found that it was actually by.
Yes, they specified by weight in
I
their
ran
episode.
into that also in some of my reading online. There was from the other guy who was testing it. I think that was a link off of the Combined Ops page. So,
Yeah,
ice
that was-
boats. Yes,
Quote Adam Savage, plausible, but ludicrous.
yes, that was I think that was the absolute best review of the whole concept. Plausible but ludicrous, which I think fits with a lot of, especially many of the British things in World War II. I often just picture a bunch of guys with their gin and tonics or martinis, smoking a pipe and coming up with completely insane ideas behind closed doors.
Because there's something special in those pipes.
It's not
Or there was
normal.
actually something to the British boarding school system.
You know what? The British boarding school
Because it
system could
broke
be a
people.
large part of it. It just sort of pushed people over the edge and snapped them. That could be.
It's how we got Mr. Geoffrey Pyke here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, and he once said, no one should experience this again. Hence, I make school now.
So, this evening you have learned about ice boats, schools, the British boarding school system, and how to set up a set of Golf Spies. Possibly most of those we don't recommend.
Quick question. Did they name the ice boat? Did Adam and Jamie name their ice boat?
Yesterday's news.
That was it. That was
Because
awesome.
it's made all the newspapers. It was called Yesterday's
Should
News.
you decide to build an ice boat of whatever material you want, an ice boat,
He said that.
please consider naming it. Yeah, you know, I just forgot. I came up with a great name. I forgot.
Oh, no.
And if you're a younger listener and you don't know what a newspaper is, find an old person and ask them.
Yesterday's news.
I run a middle school library and I still have
The
newspapers
ice
in
giant.
it. What's your boat name?
The ice giant.
The Ice Giant. There we go. So, That's going to wind us down for this evening. You have now learned about a bunch of wonderful insanity and ice boats and beaver slushies, and you need to go watch the movie Hundreds of Beavers, just because it doesn't really relate at all, but you need the life experience. If this inspires you to think of any stories, stories of your own, suggestions for other historical deep dives we might go down, send those to Merlin's Barn, MERLINS BARN, @gmail.com, or drop us a note through Instagram, or you can find our Substack page as well. And does anybody else have something to throw in?
That's all I got.
All right. You have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time of day it is or season of the year, and we will talk with you soon. Thank you for listening.